All right, let's talk about the brain. You hear about these really complex disorders, right? Dementia, Parkinson's, and the medications can feel just as complicated. But what if I told you that, at its core, it all boils down to a simple story? A story of two missing chemicals. That's what we're going to dig into today, exactly how these meds step in to try and rebalance the brain.
Okay, so let's get straight to the heart of the matter. We've got two diseases that look very different on the outside, but deep down, they share this one single problem. A specific chemical has just vanished. And here's the key. If we can figure out what's missing, then suddenly how these powerful medications work starts to make a whole lot of sense. And here are our two main characters. On one side, you've got dementia. The big problem there? A shortage of acetylcholine. Think of it as the brain's memory juice. Then, on the other side, we have Parkinson's disease. This is all about a loss of dopamine, the chemical that's absolutely crucial for smooth, controlled movement. So, right off the bat, you can see two very different problems, which means we're going to need two very different toolkits to fix them.
So here's the game plan for today. We'll start by locking in on these two main problems. Then we'll dive into the specific meds for dementia, and after that, we'll switch gears to the ones for Parkinson's. We'll even tackle some of the really tough complications. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the big picture takeaway. Sound good? Let's go.
All right, Section 1. Two brains, two problems. This is the foundation for everything else, so it's super important to keep this straight. In one brain, losing acetylcholine messes with memory and thinking. In the other, a lack of dopamine just wreaks havoc on movement. Every single thing we're about to discuss is designed to fix one of those two issues.
Okay, let's jump into our first challenge. Section 2, tackling dementia's memory loss. So the big question is, how do you actually help a brain that's running low on its main chemical for making and keeping memories?
So, what's the plan? How do we get more of that acetylcholine? Well, the first line of defense is a group of drugs called cholinesterase inhibitors. Now, to get this, you have to imagine there's this little enzyme in the brain, cholinesterase, that's basically like a tiny Pac-Man, just gobbling up all the acetylcholine it can find. These drugs, they act like a power-up that freezes Pac-Man. They block that enzyme, which means more of the good stuff, more acetylcholine is left floating around for the brain to actually use. Simple, right? Within this family of drugs, you've got a few key players. First up is Donepezil. It's a real workhorse for Alzheimer's. The big pro tip here? Take it at night. It can make you a little nauseous, so sleeping through that is a huge plus. Next, there's rivastigmine. What's cool about this one is it works for dementia and Parkinson's too. And, get this, it comes in a patch. That makes it way easier on the stomach. And finally, there's galantamine. Pretty similar to Donepezil, but just be aware, it can sometimes cause a little more nausea.
But, just boosting acetylcholine is only one part of the strategy. There's a whole other way to attack this problem, actually protecting the brain cells from getting damaged in the first place. So picture this. In dementia, there's another chemical, glutamate, that can get way too hyperactive. It's like having a radio blaring static in your ear 24/7. It just wears the brain cells out. That's where these NMDA receptor antagonists come in. They are literally like noise-canceling headphones for your brain cells, blocking out that excessive static and giving them a chance to function.
The main drug that does this is called Memantine. And with this one, how you start it is everything. The golden rule is start low and go slow. You really have to ease into it. You start with a tiny 5 milligram dose once a day, and then you slowly, week by week, bump it up until you hit that final target dose. And you might be wondering, why all the fuss? Well, this slow and steady approach gives the brain time to get used to the medication, which dramatically cuts down on side effects like dizziness or confusion. It's all about being gentle.
So, this brings us to a really powerful idea. If you have one drug that boosts the good stuff and another that blocks the bad stuff, why not use them together? It's like a classic 1-2 punch. For more advanced Alzheimer's, combining the booster, Donepezil, with the shield, Memantine, can be way more effective than either one alone. And luckily, they even put them together in a single pill to make that two-pronged attack super convenient.
Okay, time to switch gears completely. We've talked all about the memory chemical, acetylcholine. Now, in Section 3, we're turning our attention to a whole different ballgame. What happens when you lose dopamine, and how that completely disrupts movement in Parkinson's disease.
So, like we said, the absolute core of the problem here is a dopamine shortage. And it's not just anywhere in the brain. It's happening in a very specific spot called the basal ganglia. You can think of the basal ganglia as the brain's, air traffic control for movement. It coordinates everything so it's smooth and automatic.
When you don't have enough dopamine, that control tower starts to lose signal. The whole system breaks down, and that's when you see the classic symptoms: the tremor, the stiffness, and that frustrating slowness.
So how do you fix this? Well, you call in the gold standard, the undisputed champion, Levodopa/carbidopa. And this stuff is just brilliant. It's a two-part tag team. Levodopa is like the raw ingredient that the brain can cook up into dopamine. But here's the catch. If you just send levodopa in alone, most of it gets destroyed by the body before it even gets to the brain. So it needs a partner. That's where carbidopa comes in. Carbidopa is literally its bodyguard. It runs interference, protecting levodopa on its journey through the body so that as much of it as possible can get safely into the brain to do its job.
Now, using a drug this powerful means you really have to know the rules. First and foremost, you've got to take it on an empty stomach. Why? Because protein from your food will literally get in the way and block it from being absorbed properly. You also have to keep an eye out for side effects, things like nausea, feeling dizzy when you stand up too fast, and, down the road, you might see these involuntary, kind of jerky movements called dyskinesias. All important things to watch for.
Now, levodopa is a miracle drug, but it's not perfect. It has this one big catch. Its effects can start to wear off between doses. It's almost like a light switch flickering. You get these on periods where movement is good, but then off periods where the symptoms come roaring back. So to smooth things out, a whole team of helper drugs was created. Their entire job is to support levodopa and make it work better and last longer.
And here's that supporting cast. First, you've got your dopamine agonists, like Pramipexole. These guys are basically dopamine imposters. They look and act so much like dopamine that they can trick the brain's receptors. Then you have two more kinds of bodyguards. The MAO-B inhibitors work inside the brain, protecting the dopamine that's already there. And the COMT inhibitors, they work outside the brain, giving levodopa extra protection on its way in. It's like a full-blown security team for dopamine.
And hey, speaking of those COMT inhibitors, specifically one called entacapone, here is a pro tip you will never forget, and neither will your patients. You absolutely have to tell people that this medication will turn their urine bright orange. I mean bright orange. It's totally harmless, but trust me, if you don't give them a heads up, it can be a memorable surprise.
Okay, so we've covered the main meds for memory and for movement. But as you know, these conditions are more complicated than that. They can bring some really tough challenges. So in Section 4, we're going to look at how we manage some of the trickiest complications that pop up.
Okay, here's a really tough one. What do you do about psychosis in Parkinson's disease? I'm talking about hallucinations, delusions. It's a very serious and distressing problem. The big question is, how do you treat that without making all their movement symptoms 100 times worse? Well, the answer is a drug called Pimavanserin. And honestly, it's a total game changer. See, most typical antipsychotics work by blocking dopamine. For a Parkinson's patient, that would be an absolute disaster. It would just tank their movement. But Pimavanserin is so much smarter than that. It completely sidesteps the dopamine system. It's like, nope, not my problem. Instead, it goes after a totally different target related to serotonin. This allows it to calm the psychosis without messing with their motor function at all. It's incredibly precise.
Let's tackle another huge problem, and this is one that can be absolutely exhausting, especially for caregivers. I'm talking about insomnia in dementia. The sleep-wake cycle just gets completely thrown out of whack. It's so common and so difficult. So what's the move here?
A really interesting newer option is a drug called Suvorexant. Now, this isn't your typical sleeping pill that just knocks you out. It works much more elegantly. Think of it this way. Your brain has a chemical called orexin that's basically the on switch for being awake. Suvorexant works by targeting and blocking that on switch. So instead of forcing you to sleep, it just turns off the awake signal, allowing your brain's natural sleep systems to finally take over. It's a much more targeted approach.
So after all of that detail, here we are, the final section, the big takeaway. Let's boil all of this down to what really matters. And here you have it, the whole story, right here. When you strip it all down, it's actually beautifully simple. For dementia, the problem is low acetylcholine, so the solution is to boost it. For Parkinson's, the problem is low dopamine, so the solution is to replace it. It's just a powerful reminder that even in these incredibly complex brain disorders, sometimes the answer lies in simple chemistry. By figuring out exactly what's missing, we find the roadmap to treatment.